Pleasant good afternoon. It's Monday, the 19th day of June in the year 2023. My name is Christopher Jones. Welcome to the Chief Whip. And this afternoon, we have a lot to unpack. And of course, we have two guests that will be joining us via WhatsApp call. But just before we get to my guests this afternoon, let me begin by thanking all and sundry once again for coming out to the Elections Day poll on the 12th of June and casting your vote solidly for the APNU. Of course, throughout the length and breadth of the country, the APNU in the various constituencies celebrated the victory that has won over the People's Progressive Party Civic. Early this afternoon, we heard from Vice President Bart Jagdeo, who spent an entire hour on 94.1 Hot FM. In the interview, Bart Jagdeo spoke about several things, many things, and beyond things. Jagdeo iterated points, reiterated some, made mention of some that never existed, and of course, he took the opportunity to take several swipes at me for, amongst other things, bringing to the public's consciousness, particularly those residing in Georgetown and New Amsterdam, the fact that the People's Progressive Party Civic had set out to win Georgetown and New Amsterdam had nothing necessary to do with the electoral process, but it had everything to do with real estate. I did share with members of the public before the June 12th elections that all that we're seeing, all of the machinations by the People's Progressive Party Civic, was with one clear objective in mind: to dispossess people who reside in South Georgetown, parts of New Amsterdam, of their property, all because those properties are now prime real estate. Well, amongst other things, this afternoon, Bart Jagdeo himself, there's a song that the oldies, and that's my true confession. This afternoon, we heard the true confession from Bart Jagdeo, in which he himself admitted and confessed that South Georgetown, where all of the APNU, AFC, PNC supporters reside, are now prime real estate. I did say to you before the election, I did mention to you before the elections this fact, so it is nothing new. But what is happening now, Bart Jagdeo now has to walk back and come right back to the conclusion, the facts and presentations that I made during the campaign, that South Georgetown are now prime real estate. Before the elections, I did share with the persons residing in North and South Rumvelt, Festival City, just to name a few, that there is the major road that is coming back of those communities, and which Aubrey Barker is going to be linked to that road. That alone, the real estate in that area or those areas, the prices will go up. And of course, when I spoke to the residents in Plum Park and Seafield, Sophia, I did mention the fact to all of the people residing in Sophia that the said road is also going to be running back of Sophia. And therefore, Sophia is going to be linked to that four-lane highway, making all of the property in Sophia prime real estate. I did share that all of the persons who reside from the cultural center, going along the Mandela Road, all the way along the back road, those persons who reside in Lodge Housing Scheme, Tugville, Meadowbrook Gardens, Tugville Terrace, Guy Hawk Park, Lamaha Park, East and West Rheinveld, Lane Avenue, Albistown, Pond Trench, and so forth, that by virtue of the road that is running through there, all of your property value has significantly increased. And that was the objective of the PPP. By winning control of the municipality in Georgetown and that of New Amsterdam, the rates and taxes that thousands of households in those areas that I've mentioned owe to the Georgetown City Council, the plan was that the People's Progressive Party Civic would have used the law that currently exists, which gives the municipality the right to foreclose on your property and sell them. That was the objective of the PPP. Similar, Shorebase has already started operation in Port Morant, Region 6, and therefore there is need for prime real estate in New Amsterdam. And similarly, the People's Progressive Party Civic set out to win that municipality with the same objective, because the financiers who are on standby were already prepared to purchase many of the prime real estate located there in New Amsterdam. I did speak to you about the people in Linden. Just recently, we saw Irfan Ali returning from a visit in Brazil, in which he met with and spoke with the Brazilian president. Amongst other things, the discussion was centered around the road coming from Brazil. That road will have to pass through the mining town of Linden. By virtue of that fact, all of the property or real estate in Linden Town will become prime real estate. And as such, the People's Progressive Party Civic, and particularly Bharat Jagdeo, set out with his $9 billion expenditure to win these three main municipalities. The people came out, the people heeded the warning, the people looked at the information that was provided to them, and they rejected the PPP. Similarly, we want to share with you now that those views have not changed, that there's a new method afoot. Those persons that still reside there in Pontrench, those people who are squatting on East and West Rumfeld Front Road, as well as those who are squatting on the reserve between Meadowbrook and Tocqueville, stretching all the way to Guyhawk Park, part of the PPP's beautification plan, which was articulated by Bharat Jagdeo just a few weeks before the local government elections, those plans are still in train. Which has, in order for them to do any beautification, those squatters will have to be removed. We did remind you that the People's Progressive Party Civic demonstrated how they deal with these matters. Taking, for example, the persons there in the village of Mocha, Arcadia, in which we saw live for all to see that their homes were being bulldozed, their livelihoods being dismantled, and their livelihood being destroyed. And of course, this was repeated again on the Linden-Suzac Highway. Bharat Jagdeo this afternoon took all of this into consideration and he tried to rebut it. We did as well share with you last week on this program that had the People's Progressive Party Civic been successful at these local government elections, particularly winning Georgetown and New Amsterdam, the plans was afoot that they would have called a snap elections for Monday, the 18th of December, 2023. I did share with you then that those plans likely would have been shelved. What we learned over the weekend, that apparently there is a clear rift in the People's Progressive Party Civic. Those Jagdeoites who are bent on agreeing with him and his plan that we should move to a snap elections, which would be on Monday, the 18th of December. And of course, they're the other side of the PPP who are saying that we should keep the status quo and go all the way to 2025. There is a big debate in the People's Progressive Party Civic, whether they go with Jagdeo and the snap election for December 18th, or if we keep the status quo and the People's Progressive Party Civic remain in office until 2025, when the elections are constitutionally due. The question was asked, why would anyone give up the current status? They are already in government, and therefore they can remain in government until 2025. Well, we remind you that the 2020 general and regional elections, there are many unanswered questions. We did share with you, coming out from the recount, the many discrepancies and inaccuracies coming out from those elections. As we reveal, the People's Progressive Party Civic is an installed administration. That note is around the world. Everyone knows that the PPP has been installed in office. This label is one of which Jagdeo does not enjoy, being called an installed administration. And in his view, the one way that you can remove this label as being an installed administration is by calling a snap elections and winning it outright. So then, therefore, no one could refer to the People's Progressive Party Civic as an installed administration. Now, 1 hour today, Bharat Jagdeo spent on 94.1. It's either between Jagdeo or the host of the program, but the elephant in the room was never discussed. No mention, no question was asked about this big elephant in the room. In fact, in the studios of 94.1, standing in between Bharat Jagdeo and the host was the largest elephant in the room. And both Bharat Jagdeo skillfully avoid speaking about the elephant in the room. And of course, the host of that program strategically avoid asking any question about that big elephant that is standing in the room. And that elephant is Nigel Dharmalal. One would find it strange, as we did here in studios, as we were listening to Jagdeo's rant on 94.1, and of course the host, and not a single question was asked about the elephant in the room, in which Bharat Jagdeo has a sitting government minister of local government and regional development. Nigel Darmalal, who has been accused by a minor of being raped and sodomized by the said minister. Today, we read in the newspapers that the said minister has since proceeded on administrative leave to make way for an investigation. Over the weekend, we read the Child Protection Agency has interviewed the young woman. Plus, we read statements emanating from the Minister of Social Protection. But today, when the sitting vice president spent an hour on 94.1, the sitting vice president, Bharat Jagdeo, found it convenient not to mention anything about Nigel Darmalal. And of course, the host, perhaps oversight on his part, or complete ignorance of the issue, or unaware, or he doesn't have a social media platform, or he never saw anything on social media that made any reference to Nigel Darmalal or any reference to a sitting government minister of which it's alleged that he raped and sodomized a minor. Not a single question for 61 minutes and 42 seconds. Not a single question was asked about Nigel Darmalal, and Bharat Jagdeo didn't even mention him. Why? Okay. Politics, as I mentioned to people before, that there is perception and there is the reality. And what Bharat Jagdeo sought to do today is to provide you with the perception. Perception about PPP doing well, perception about PPP going to keep their promises, perception that the PPP won these constituency, all sorts of perception. Bharat Jagdeo skillfully avoided speaking about the reality. And the reality is there's a sitting PPP government minister by the name of Nigel Darmalal, local government minister with responsibility for regional development. Last week, some stinging allegation about rape and sodomy of a minor by the said minister. Bharat Jagdeo didn't speak about that today because Bharat Jagdeo don't want you to live in the reality. So what Bharat Jagdeo did today on 94.1 was give you the perception that all is well, that the PPP is doing wonderful across the country. What Bharat Jagdeo didn't also mention, that this is not the first time that the said minister has been accused of such acts and behavior. The said minister has also been accused while he was permanent secretary for the Ministry of Amerindian or Indigenous Affairs years ago of beating a female inside his office. All of those allegations were made. Last year, between October to December, we read from a young woman who resides in the United States inappropriate conversations by the said minister Nigel Darmalal to her, of which he even allegedly sent her a photograph of his private parts. The mother of the young lady in the United States wrote to President Irfan Ali, bringing to his attention all of this information. It was Irfan Ali who said that once you have the evidence, you should provide it to him. We saw nothing coming out from those allegations. Here it is again, a second, well, not even a second allegation to tell you the truth, but a new allegation surrounding this very same minister, Nigel Darmalal. But Jagdeo, on his 1 hour perception talk, didn't speak about this particular reality. And that, my friend, is how politicians like Bharat Jagdeo start to bring distraction to you. Speak about everything else. Call all names. That is the perception. He didn't speak to you about the reality, what is happening in his government. That the fact that President Irfan Ali wants Nigel Darmalal as Minister for Local Government and Regional Development gone. Now, if this becomes a reality, I will give Irfan Ali all the kudos that he needs. But information that we've received inside of the People's Progressive Party Civic is that President Irfan Ali is of the view, firmly of the view, that Nigel Darmalal should go. But the challenge that President Irfan Ali has is Vice President Bharat Jagdeo, for whom Nigel Darmalal happens to be a Jagdeonite. And therefore, Jagdeo wants to ensure that he keeps all of his Jagdeonites in cool, in check, in office. That is the tussle and the fight that is currently happening in the People's Progressive Party Civic. And that is why today, Bharat Jagdeo 94.1 sought to give you the perception, but Bharat Jagdeo 94.1 did not share with you the reality that a sitting government minister of the People's Progressive Party Civic has once again been accused of rape and sodomize of a minor. And as I mentioned before, this is not the first instance or first allegation being leveled at the feet of this said minister. Continues to be in office. But even take it further that, it is not even the first time that allegation of this nature is being leveled against any PPP sitting minister. We can take you way back in the days of strip and slap one former minister, Barry Ramsaran, when an activist confronted him and he told the activist that I could get these women to strip and slap you, etc., etc., and the list goes on. So this is nothing new for the People's Progressive Party Civic. But what the party always do is circle the wagon when it comes to these issues. We saw a deafening silence from many of the female ministers of government on this particular issue. We saw many organizations that in times past had everything to say about every other thing that is happening in the country. I recall when leader of the opposition, Aubrey Norton, refused to shake the hand of President Irfan Ali. We saw many commentators, people writing and condemning. We heard from persons like Jerry Gavaya, for example. Oh, this is terrible, and he should have shaken the man's hand, and so on. Now, when we have an allegation, a new allegation, on a sitting PPP Minister of Government, Nigel Darmalal, responsible for regional development and local government, many of these very persons and organizations have gone silent. On every other frivolous issue, they find their voices, they find their pens and they write, and they take to social media and they post. But on this particular issue, many of the defenders of democracy and rule of law and rights and human rights and protection of children, all of a sudden, all of these voices have suddenly gone silent. Perhaps I've missed it, but I know Jerry Gavai is a good friend of mine, and I'll speak to him this afternoon. Unless I missed the post that you made, Mr. Jerry Gavai, please share with me, and I'll correct myself if I would have missed your post calling for a full investigation into Nigel Darmalal. But the question as well, too, when it comes to an investigation, could we trust the local authorities, of which recently we saw allegations being leveled against them? Could we trust the regional authorities to do such an investigation? No. Perhaps we may need now to look internationally to identify people who we consider impartial, not related to the People's Progressive Party Civic, have no interest in Guyana, financially, oil, or otherwise, to lead this investigation. But as I mentioned before, there is a glimmer of hope. There is a beacon of light based on the information that we have coming out of the People's Progressive Party Civic, is that President Irfan Ali is prepared to give Nigel Darmalal the boots, to remove him from office, to remove him as a government minister. The challenge that Irfan Ali now has is Vice President Bharat Jagdeo, who seemed to enjoy Nigel Darmalal's support, and therefore Jagdeo has now stepped in to block Irfan Ali from dismissing Nigel Darmalal. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back. Welcome to the Chief Whip, and I'll invite my first guest to have part of the conversation. Stay tuned.
But somehow they have lost their sense of courage and their sense of principle to pull back the party away from him. And that is what I used to tell them, that you allow Jagdeo to do what he wants, he's going to run roughshod and riot over all of you. And it has turned out to be exactly that. Exactly that has happened. So if for the sake of our country, for the sake of the investments, for the sake of the future of this country, it is necessary, just like how you would have it in any other liberal democratic order, an investigation carried out, even if it's an internal investigation. And at the appropriate time, knowing very well that we got 2 terms or no more, that the president, Irfaan Ali, could say, PJ, just take a turn. Take the right turn, like the AFC. Take right turns. Go along your way. Oh, yes, you could be at the party. Go to Freedom House. Don't come here. Don't go and meet investors. We want to meet investors for. We're spending over $500 million on Go Invest. More than that, we give Go Invest. That's the place people should go.
All right, welcome back. All right, so we will be joined in a few minutes by my first guest who will be sharing in the discourse this afternoon. But for those of you just joining us, let me just quickly bring you up to speed. We are discussing new developments emanating from the People's Progressive Party Civic. Just last week, I shared with you on this program that Vice President Barrett Jagdeo was sharing with the PPP. Should the PPP be successful at the local government elections, particularly winning Georgetown and New Amsterdam, that they would have been moving to call a snap elections, which would have been on Monday, the 18th of December. Since the PPP was not successful at winning Georgetown and New Amsterdam, some of those plans have since changed. But over the weekend, it took a turn for, well, not the worst, but the difference, because apparently there is discussions or confusion in the People's Progressive Party Civic. They are the Jagdeo Knights, who are agreeing with Barrett Jagdeo that there should be a snap elections and this election should be on Monday, the 18th of December. However, they are the other section of the PPP who is of the opinion that they should remain in office until 2025 when an election is constitutionally due. As well, today Barrett Jagdeo spent an entire hour on 94.1 speaking to you about the perception of what is happening in Guyana. What Barrett Jagdeo did not do is speak to you about the reality. Neither the host of the program didn't even take the opportunity to ask the particular question about the elephant that is in the room. And that elephant is as it relates to the current local government minister with responsibility for regional development, Nigel Darmalal, who last week, again, have been accused of rape and sodomy of a minor. Mind you, this is not the first time that such an allegation has been leveled at the feet of the said minister. Last year, October, November, or December, we did read statement emanating from a young lady in the United States in which she shared with us conversations between herself, allegedly, and the minister, Nigel Darmalal. The mother of that child then wrote to President Irfaan Ali, bringing all of these matters to his attention. Then, of course, before that, when Nigel Darmalal served as permanent secretary in the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, it was alleged that on several occasions, he beat, physically assaulted women inside of the office of permanent secretary. Here it is now that this new allegation is before us. But when Barrett Jagdeo spoke on 94.1 today, he didn't take the opportunity to speak to you about the reality, what is happening in the country. And that reality is that, again, a sitting PPP Minister of Government has been accused of rape. That is what is happening right now in the country. But Jagdeo spoke about everything else. And even before I go to the phone line to bring in my guests, I want to quickly remind you of what Barrett Jagdeo said earlier today, when he made mention the fact that persons who reside in South Georgetown because of the road infrastructure that is currently happening, the property values have since increased. That is what I've and the colleagues from the APNU have been sharing with you throughout the campaign season, that the fact that all of these infrastructures are done, the property value in Georgetown have skyrocketed. Bharat Jagdeo on the program today made that confession, finally. And of course, he spoke about the people in Pontrench, the folks in East and West Rhineveld who were squatting on the lands there. We spoke to you about that. And we did mention to you that part of the PPP's beautification, as they refer to it as, was to remove all of those persons. But as it relates to the stinging allegation level against the local government minister, President, and as I mentioned before, there is a glimmer of hope, a small beacon light of hope, based on the information we have, is that Irfan Ali wants Nigel Dharmalal gone. Irfan Ali wants to dismiss him as minister. The challenge that Irfan Ali apparently has is that of Vice President Bharat Jagdeo, because Nigel Dharmalal happens to be one of the Jagdeoites. So Bharat Jagdeo and a few in the PPP are fighting tooth and nail that Nigel must remain. And then there is President Irfan Ali on the other side with another group in the PPP who wants Nigel Dharmalal gone. That is the current state of play as it relates to the Nigel Dharmalal investigation. My operator was showing you earlier the protests that happened outside of the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development. So we're going to take that break now. And then when we come back on the other side of the break, I will have my guests and we will discuss these and other matters. Stay tuned. This is the Chief Whip.
The political level, with these serious allegations and all the police will be ensured of these two institutions, the cabinet and the parliament.
What about the police, Mr. Randall? How confident are you that they can conduct a compassionate investigation?
Well, last night I spoke on that. The police force sent a superintendent to go take a statement from the girl that she was speaking untruths. The Police Service Commission should call in that superintendent and discipline him. You do not do that in the nature of the circumstances of a little child and sexual offenses. The whole tenor of the Sexual Offences Act, as amended and put up by Priya Chan, was that when the children are young like this and vulnerable, you simply cannot just go and get a statement from a policeman. I don't know if the girl made a report that it was not her, but you know this policeman went and got a statement from her. And today, again, I understand, the policeman got to be in some hot water here too. You do not do that. It was trying to subvert the course of justice, to pervert the course of justice. And I am terribly annoyed. The professionalism of a police force that we tried hard from 2015 to 2020 under all the various reforms that we had. You know, these reforms from the British security sector, all have gone to naught now. All have gone to naught. And look how quick they are to send a superintendent to go get a statement to the girl talking untruth. That girl would have been most uncomfortable there. So I am of the belief that policeman will certainly tell us who instructed him to do that. And if it was on by himself, he should be disciplined.
Please push back. Master here, what the other road sound? All right.
continue that effort because they have never been about the human development. It shows in the way they budget. You know, you put 1% or less than 1% of your annual budget to poverty relief measures. So, you know, I could go on, but I want to make the point that Barra Jagdeo mustn't come now to try to distract the people of Guyana. What we want to know is what he is doing about Nigel Dharamlal and these rape allegations that have been made against him. Another one has surfaced today from a young lady from Region 9.
Yeah.
Making it, Lord knows how many such allegations. The people of Guyana must be respected enough so that the vice president must know that whatever you are opening your mouth to say has to include an update on what is happening with Nigel Dharamlal. I mean, Chris, I said it today when I was being interviewed by a few journalists when we were on the protest line, that as Guyanese, we have to decide what our non-negotiables are. You know? And the protection of our women and children got to be a non-negotiable. It has to be. Where are we as a society when these most damning allegations are made? And you are hearing stories, oh, it's trumped up by the opposition. The opposition is pushing this. You know, I heard one commentator talking about, oh, the opposition is weak and not doing anything. And that is the angle he took. Instead of holding the people that have this monster in office feet to the fire, he's coming to attack the opposition. Completely skewed. It's not the opposition that got Nigel Dharamlal there. He's not serving at the pleasure of the opposition. We are not the ones doubling down and protecting him. But they chose, they do not even have the courage to put the blame where it lies, to say, this is your minister, he's serving at your pleasure, and he needs to be removed pending this investigation.
I was sharing earlier this afternoon with the viewers that perhaps we can consider it a beacon light of hope. But information that I received over the weekend coming out from the People's Progressive Party Civic is that Irfan Ali wants Nigel Dharamlal gone. And apparently there is now a dispute in the PPP with the quote-unquote the Jagdeoites, of which Nigel Dharamlal happens to be one. And there is the Irfan Aliites who, and in his corner. So Irfan Ali wants Nigel Dharamlal gone. Barra Jagdeo is saying that he has to remain in office. Is it a case that we can say birds of a feather flock together? Because Guyana was calling and is still calling for an investigation into Barra Jagdeo and Sue Gates. So here it is now that another minister has fallen prey to the calls for an investigation. But Barra Jagdeo knows that an investigation he doesn't want into Sue, and therefore he has to protect those individuals like himself who, over the period, investigations have been called on or for.
Well, it appears to me that the last I checked, whenever you Google who's the president of Guyana, Irfan Ali name and image comes up. Yeah. Because he must eat if he is the president or not, and he must act accordingly. And so since this minister serves at his pleasure, well, I suppose the point is moot, since this gentleman has asked to proceed on administrative leave, another anomaly in the scheme of things. But certainly, to have somebody dogged by all of these allegations constantly, I mean, where there is smoke, there has to be fire in it. And so, you know, it doesn't surprise me that there is this tension. Nigel Dharamlal seems to be some type of sacred cow in the PPP, because we know that he and his ministry, it is they're dropping the ball that has resulted in what happened at Mahdia happening. Yeah. You know, up to now, because we know that the report prepared by UNICEF was was sent to his ministry for the necessary action. The report which pointed out the deplorable condition of hinterland dormitories and of dormitories across Guyana. And the one in Madia, it appears, fell under his purview, and he never took action on it. Never took action on it, and that resulted in we're told, this tragedy that we had in Madia, where we've lost 20 souls. Now, interestingly, no COI. It's 28 days today, and no commission of inquiry set up to look into this matter. And so Dharamlal prepared to enjoy the status of a sacred cow. But I believe that Guyanese people are fed up. I believe that Guyanese women and the men who stand with us have drawn a line in the sand. Today on the protest line, I saw people from the church. I saw Pastor Yearwood out there and his wife. I saw a sister from the TCI, you know, who was on the protest line with another one of her colleagues. And you saw people of diverse backgrounds and interests coming together to say, you know, no man, enough is enough. And we have to make sure, Chris, that we say to the victims, come forward, and that we are able as a society to provide a safe space for these victims to come forward.
You know what I was talking with earlier today, Amanzo, being that Nigel Darmalal has been part of the People's Progressive Party for a number of years. God forbid, but would it be far-fetched to believe that perhaps, and hopefully it is not the case, hopefully I'm wrong, I pray that I'm wrong, but should another incident emerge of which we hear one of the very said PPP members, senior members, or even his colleagues, ministers, if one of their daughters, God forbid, ever go to them and say, Mommy, because likely they refer to Nigel as Uncle Nigel, I am assuming. Uncle Nigel touched me some time ago inappropriately, you know? Because from all indication, this seems to be a predator who preys on young girls, you know? And God forbid, as I said before, if some senior official of the PPP, if someday one of their daughters say to them that Mommy, Daddy, some time ago when Uncle Nigel was here or when we were at whatever, Uncle Nigel touched me inappropriately. God forbid. I mean, that is the sort of situation that we're dealing with here. There was also an allegation earlier last year of the said minister impregnating a young woman in one of the indigenous communities. But that at the time surfaced and went away. But as I mentioned again, it's just an allegation. And then between November, December period, we had the young woman from the United States who wrote and shared chats between herself, allegedly, and Minister Nigel Darmalal, of which, amongst other things, he sent to her photograph of his private parts, which then give them the name, I think, 2-inch or 3-inch or whatever the case be. And then you had those incidents of which you yourself and the female colleague members of the opposition experienced at the hand of Nigel Darmalal in the parliament when he said to MP Natasha Singh Lewis that you need a dildo, you know, all of that. So clearly this man has a penchant for such egregious acts, whether verbal or physical, etc. And I did mention, and the Kaicher News or the news print could bear me out. People can go and search and find this. When he served as permanent secretary in the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, there are allegations of which he physically beat women in his office. And that is years ago. So this is nothing new.
You know, Chris, let me tell you, us that there is something wrong with this man. But you know who I have the bigger problem with? The supposed right-thinking people around him who continue to provide him shelter. That is where my problem is, because I understand that the only thing required for evil to flourish is for good men to do nothing.
Correct.
And the people who are around him, who continue to cover up these allegations, who continue to villainize the opposition as if we put him up to these nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, this is the problem that I have. And as a nation, I keep saying, Chris, we have to determine our non-negotiables, or else we are going to see this country of ours descend into such lawlessness that we will not be able to live here in peace. This is how it begins, by allowing these things to slip, and allowing these things to slide, and allowing predators like Nigel Dharamlal, disrespectful men like Nigel Dharamlal, because they will say all of the other things are allegations. Men who verbally assault women on the floor of the National Assembly the way Nigel Dharamlal has, and that is a matter of public record. When we allow them to continue with this behavior and they go unchecked, there's not even on record a public rebuke of his minister from Irfan Ali when he spoke about the dildo issue.
Yeah.
Nothing. And this is the difficulty. If we remain silent on these issues, we'll be contributing to the decline, the moral decay of this nation. And I'm saying to us as Guyanese that we got to take stock. Wrong is wrong, even if it's your brother or sister doing it.
Absolutely.
Right is right if your brother or sister is doing it. And if we as a nation decide that we're drawing the line in the sand today, and this is it, then you will see those ministers who carry themselves as if they are above the law, who believe that they could speak to anybody anyhow, rape people, girl children, molest people's girl children, and come out scot-free, that they will curb their behavior immediately, because they will know that there is no shelter for their wickedness, but because they know that there are places and people that they can run to.
Yeah.
This prevails and pervades our society.
You know, when you speak about aiding and abetting, I mean, it's like it's like everything that I heard from Barrett Jaglio earlier this afternoon is tantamount to aiding and abetting an alleged rapist. And that is speaking from listening to him on 94.1. And as a former president, he had his cabinet and ministers, as a current vice president. And you have all of these junior ministers and whatnot, and ministers. And to spend 61 minutes live on live radio and not one single mention of Nigel Dharamlal, a current sitting minister who has proceeded on administrative leave, has called for an investigation. His battery of lawyers have issued a statement. And here it is, Vice President Barrett Jaglio, live on radio in this modern age, spoke for over 60 plus minutes and didn't mention the fact that a current PPP minister has proceeded on administrative leave to pave way for an investigation into an allegation of rape. One could only view that as aiding and abetting.
Chris, let me say this, and this is where the media as one of the cornerstone institutions of a democracy, of a democratic society, have such an important role to play. I'm not sure who interviewed him, if the person is a journalist. I'm not sure who did the interview, but certainly any journalist would ask the question. Yeah. This is the most hotly debated topic topic in the country at the moment.
That's right.
And so I think it brings sharply to the fore the fact that, again, like I said, I don't know who did the interview because honestly, I was busy doing some other stuff. So the media has a role to play to make sure that officials are asked these very hard questions and provide the nation with answers. You know, and it brings me to the fact that look, during the APNU AFC tenure, Chris, one of the things that I recall is we used to have post-cabinet briefings.
Correct.
There has not been one post-cabinet briefing for the last 3 years that Irfaan Ali has been governing this country. Not one. Not one. I recall when contracts were awarded, they were put in the papers and everybody could see. But you know what? There are people that support this lack of transparency and they fail to understand one thing. That Chris, if you support the lack of transparency here, that practice grew. And it will only be a matter of time before it consumes you.
Exactly.
It will only be a matter of time. So, you know, I just think Barjagdil came out there today to try to distract people from the fact that the heat is on his government. The protest action that people saw today continues to move. Like I said, the only thing that is required for people to prevail is for good men to do nothing. In any other Caribbean island, in any other functioning democracy, Nigel Darmla would have been asked to tender his resignation forthwith. But because they know that such a divided population, they know that they can find shelter. They know that there are people who will be willing to buy the story. This is something the opposition cook up. Like we could cook up the 9, 10, 11, 12 allegations that have already been leveled against this man. You know? And so, you know, we as a nation are at an inflection point that we have to determine how we will proceed from here. How we proceed from here will determine whether this country, even though financially rich, will be morally and ethically bankrupt.
You know, Amanza, I wanna quickly get your view on this. There've always been the view that in Guyana there are two separate and apart rules and laws that govern the people, as in John Public, and there is another rule and laws that are applied to, well, big ones, let me put it that way. Because had such an allegation been leveled against an ordinary man at John Public, I bet you when the allegations came out, I think it's either Wednesday night or Thursday evening, by Friday, that person would have been hauled in by the Ghana police force. We're not seeing it in this case, and it's not the first time. And that's why I said there are different laws apparently for different folks. If you're a PPP, go ahead.
We don't need to look far. Look at the record time with which that minor child was slapped with murder charges. Record time. You see? So we just have to cast our mind back to the Mali ASU to see. We're not supposing or conjecturizing. The evidence is manifest. Look at what happened to the people at Hillfoot. So you know what is it? You know, oh my God, he was to let them hear what is being said to the nation of Guyana. If we continue to call evil good and call good evil, however this country ends up will be completely at our foot. Will be completely at our feet as Guyanese. We have the as it is the people of Guyana who have the power, and we have to recognize that we have got to wrest this nation away from what we're seeing here and bring it back on the path of some decency and some semblance of order. And
So, Amanda, I don't know if you can still hear us.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Did you hear me?
No, we lost you there for a few seconds.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what this last thing you heard me say, but
We have to rescue the nation.
no, yeah, this is the point. I'm saying that we have to rescue the nation from this. It is up to us to do it. And, you know, we have to be able to do that. I do have to, I really want to thank you, Chris, for bringing me on briefly.
Most welcome.
I am heading off to take care of another appointment that I have. So
Excellent.
thank you so much for having me.
Most welcome, Amanda.
All right, good. Bye-bye.
All right, so that was, of course, Amanza Walton Desir, APNU AFC Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Relations. And of course, she was speaking with me as it relates to what is unfolding in Guyana. And of course, as I take my leave on this program today, again, so this afternoon on 94.1, the Vice President, former President Barrett Jagdeo, spent an entire hour speaking live on radio. And both Barrett Jagdeo and the host of the program did not even pay attention, not even an inkling of the elephant that is in the room. Barrett Jagdeo went on essentially what you can refer to as a distraction tactic to take your mind off and away from the elephant in the room. And that elephant in the room happens to be the sitting PPP Minister of Local Government and Regional Development, Nigel Darmalal, of which allegations of rape of a minor has been leveled against him. And mind you, this is not the first, is not the second, third, fourth, or fifth time this said minister, these allegations are being leveled at. Last year in the National Assembly of Guyana, the said minister, loudly while on his feet in the Parliament of Guyana, said to opposition member Parliament Natasha Singh Lewis that she needed a dildo. When he was confronted by opposition member Sherrod Duncan, verbally confronted by Sherrod Duncan, the Parliament of Guyana suspended Sherrod Duncan, but not Nigel Darmalal. And Nigel Darmalal was allowed to continue. Here it is again, new allegations, fresh new allegations, alleged of rape of a minor being leveled against Nigel Darmalal. Vice President Barrett Jagdeo comes live on the radio, speak to the nation, and didn't mention one single word about his sitting minister who had since proceeded on administrative leave, who has called for an investigation, of whom allegation of rape of a minor has been leveled at. Jagdeo said nothing about it. Neither the host of the program didn't see or apparently never heard of this issue that is brewing in this nation, of which a young girl, a minor, allegedly was raped and sodomized by a sitting minister of government. And whether you have children or not, whether these allegations are true or not, the mere fact that when such allegations are made, they must be called resolutely across this country, irrespective of your political persuasion, irrespective of your ethnicity, irrespective of your religious belief. There must be immediately an investigation into such. And if the allegations turn out to be true, the person should be incarcerated. That is how you protect children. Not come on a radio program or not be the host of a program and not seek to take the opportunity that is before you to ask these very same question of the very individual who is sitting before you. You know, there's a saying that every cow is cry for your own calf. Had it been a family member of yours, and I'm speaking here in general to everyone who's listening to this program, if it had been a family member of yours, you would have been out and about calling for an investigation. If it had been your daughter, you would have been calling for an investigation. If it had been your granddaughter, you would have been calling for an investigation. If it had been your stepchild, your niece, your cousin, you would have been calling for an investigation. And that is why we say every cow or every mama cow does cry for your own calf. But the point that has to be made is when your neighbor house on fire, throw water upon you own. Because if you allow or try to sweep under the carpet these allegations without having these allegations investigated to ascertain whether or not it is true, and you sweep it under the carpet, is that you allow perpetrators of such to continue doing it. As we mentioned to you many times before, this is not the first allegation that is being leveled against this said Minister Nigel Darmalal. The list is long, as far back as when he was permanent secretary of the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs. There are allegations about him physically beating women in his office. We've even heard between these 3 years since the PPP has been in office that the said minister and another one, we're not going to name that minister now, has been using several or a few of the state houses, particularly State House in Anna Regina and the State House in New Amsterdam, as his personal hotel. Those are some of the information we've always had. And there are other ministers' names who accompany him while on these excursions. Now, when we are confronted as a nation, a young fledgling nation, of allegation of girls, underage girl, being raped and sodomized by a sitting minister, suddenly everybody political up. I's PPP, I's PNC, I's WPA. So if I's PPP, I can't talk about it because it's my party people. But if the girl was your own, if the girl was your daughter or your niece or one of them, you would have had something to say. And that is where the morality comes into play as a country. As a country. As I said in a post over the weekend, there is always a line. There is always a line. And regardless of which political party you support, when it comes to children, underage girls, an allegation that they were raped, sodomized by a sitting minister of government, the most senior government official of a country, these allegations are leveled against. And suddenly you want to become political because you're PPP, and this is a PPP man, I can't talk about it, I shouldn't say nothing about it. But if it was your child or a relative of yours, you would have had something to say. I said earlier when I spoke at the Mansa Walton Desir, and I do hope, God forbid, that it doesn't happen. But if it turns out that this young lady, as we know, is not the first or second or third, but if there are no allegations of some of you senior members of the PPP who your children normally interact with other senior members of the PPP, God forbid that your daughter come or your son comes to you at some point in time and say, Mommy, Daddy, Uncle Nigel been touched me inappropriately. God forbid. Then you will see a different reaction from you. But as I said before, every mama cow does cry for your own calf. And I'll close the program by saying this. When your neighbor house on fire, throw water upon you own, because the fire will spread. And for your silence, you will allow perpetrators like these to continue to spread until it reaches your home. Until it reaches your home. Aiding and abetting. And that is what I saw today on 94.1 Hot FM. Aiding and abetting. Not a single question was posed to Vice President Bharat Jagdeo on this, the most hot present issue that is confronting the nation. right, so we're now getting some new developments coming to hand. We're being told that the Minister, Nigel Darmalal, Minister of Local Government and Regional Development, has just checked in, or he is currently at Brickdam Police Station, and he is in the company of his lawyers. I want to quickly repeat that. We're now getting information that Minister Nigel Darmalal, PVV Minister of Local Government and Regional Development, is currently at the Brickdam Police Station, and from all indications, he is there with his lawyers. And of course, we will keep you updated in terms of that bit of information now coming to hand here in the program. It's the 7 o'clock hour, and of course, I'd like to thank you very much for viewing this program, The Chief Whip, and of course, we do look forward to seeing you again on another program of The Chief Whip. Until then, have a pleasant rest of your afternoon. Goodbye for now. All right. So, of course, I did mention earlier in the program as well, too, there are calls being made by President Irfan Ali to remove Nigel Darmalal as the Minister of Local Government. Irfan Ali is calling for the removal of Nigel Darmalal as local government minister. However, apparently Irfan Ali is getting pushback from Vice President Bharat Jagdeo, who has challenged him and not wanting to remove Nigel Darmalal. So there's that happening right now in the PPP. Irfan Ali wants Nigel Darmalal gone. Vice President Jagdeo wants him to remain in office. We will keep you updated in terms of that information. Have a pleasant rest of your afternoon. Goodbye for now.